everyone. Welcome back to another live Q&A. Sorry, we're running behind a little bit today. We're trying to pump out this new series, our Express Entry Getting It Right series. And so we just finished recording another episode on settlement funds today, which is an interesting topic given the potential impact it could have when people start losing job offer points, especially if you're outside of the country. And if those are taken away, then what impact will they have on your need to provide settlement funds? So that's where we're at today. It's a good day. Alicia and I are excited to be back every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Unfortunately, it's 10:09 now, but how are you doing, Alicia?
I'm okay, Mark. I think, it's a good day. We've got to, be grateful for what we have. I think there's a lot of worry out there right now for sure about what's happening in terms of geopolitics and tariffs and all sorts of insanity happening right now. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty and that's difficult for a lot of people. And so we are trying to answer questions that are going to be helpful for people to provide a little bit of solidity when we're looking at the world of Canadian immigration law.
Indeed. One thing I want to point out for everyone, there's obviously been changes, and one of the big changes is the categories that have switched. So last Thursday, Igor and I did breaking kind of meet the new Express Entry categories for 2025. If you haven't had a chance to watch that video, I encourage you to go back and watch that one. But we basically break down the winners and the losers in terms of eligibility through these new category-based draws. And I'll be honest, you guys, it's a real tough situation now because we've got individuals who have made huge sacrifices to align their work experience. They've literally changed jobs to fit within occupations that were in the category based, that they were hoping to get drawn under, only to realize now that in one fell swoop, their knock code is off the list. And so for those clients, it breaks my heart for them because in many cases, they banked everything on having work experience in a particular knock code that is no longer on the list. So when you're trying to figure out, what the future holds and what strategy do I employ to try to increase my chances of securing an ITA, you have to realize that, these category-based draws are very volatile. And what could be, on the list right now, it could be gone by the time you've hit your 6 month of experience working in those occupations. And so if I slide over here, you'll see that the government has now updated this section on category-based draws. And if you scroll down, for those of you who are unaware, they still have the following categories on here, although I would probably take the T out of STEM because it's not STEM anymore, it's SEM, science, engineering, and math occupations. And the reason I say that is if you go down to the STEM category, you will see that there are virtually no IT-related positions. You can see there's lots of engineers, technologists, technicians, but the list has been drastically reduced. You can see to just a handful. There's literally,
11.
just a handful, 11 total occupations on this list. And we have a new player to the game, which is education occupations, which, Alicia, I just don't understand. Maybe because of all the people that have come to Canada now, maybe schools do have shortages. But I know from my experience, and I've talked with people across the country, there's a lot of young new teachers that don't have jobs. So I don't know exactly how and what lobbying got all, primary and secondary school teachers on the list, but they're there now. So elementary, kindergarten, high schools here, elementaries here, and work experience in these occupations will allow people to come through. And remember, by and large, most teachers have to pretty much be permanent residents of Canada, in many jurisdictions to be able to get a job and get accreditation with, the teacher associations in each province. Now, there may be some exceptions, but generally that tends to be the rule. So what they're saying is if you are a foreign teacher and you have this experience, you could potentially get drawn if there's an education category-based draw. And I find that very interesting, Alicia, because those individuals would still be pretty hard pressed to be able to get teaching positions in Canada based on the requirements for eligibility. Not impossible, but it's, I guess in the same light, Alicia, it's not different than a foreign trained doctor who is coming, right? So maybe, that's, when you look at healthcare and social services occupations, we have all of these specialists on the list, even dentists and general practitioners and massage therapists are even on the list, which in Canada, to go through this becomes quite problematic, right, Alicia? Because massage therapists and other allied health professionals like this often are contract based. They're paid on a contract basis. And some are employees, and some, massage therapy clinics will pay their Canadian workers this way. But you have to be really, really careful. And then the final piece that I'll point out before, and then I'll stop talking about category-based draws, because Igor and I, we ranted about this quite a bit. Well, actually two. One, seriously, still French, okay, as a priority, that's fine. But there's up to 72 extra points on every single draw for a Francophone, candidate who has basically a CLB 7. Well, CLB 9 or NCLC 9 can get up to an additional 24 points for a second language, as well as the 50 bonus points for French. But the one I wanted to point out, Alicia, and this is one I just don't get, and I pull in Minister Miller here. Oh, he's got a big presence here. He's got a big presence. We'll just shrink him down here so he fits with us. So there he is. He's joining us. So this is one, Minister Miller, that I don't understand. So if you go to science technology, this is STEM. Okay, this is STEM, you guys. And you scroll down here and you look at what's on the list here. I don't understand insurance agents and brokers. So, Alicia, can you figure out how
I mean,
that got on there?
Igor wrote a nice article and he talks about maybe for actuarial science, and maybe that's why they're trying to evaluate things. But yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting one. I mean, I guess maybe the T is held by the cybersecurity specialists. Like, I guess that's the one T area still, but they
Yeah,
definitely STEM lost and healthcare and social services occupations won.
they
So
did.
healthcare and social services occupations went up to 37 different knock
Yeah,
codes.
they did.
And
They
so this
increased.
is really important. And also, Mark, they actually changed the title. So it used to just be healthcare, and now it's healthcare and social services occupations. And
Yes.
I don't know about you, but I actually have a number of clients who are social workers or who are in the other knock that is also for social work related
Mm-hmm.
community service workers.
Yeah.
So we do know that in Canada there is quite a large shortage, especially in care homes and facilities, and this is where that 42201 knock is quite important for a number of different sectors in different provinces. So,
Mm-hmm.
they are
That's
looking at their
definitely a
data.
winners. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll point out that ag is not a winner. So all
Hmm.
that's on this list is butchers. So all
Hmm.
of the specialized livestock workers, all those positions that are just full of foreign nationals, because Canadians generally don't want to do the job. They don't want to slosh around in their gumboots and cow manure all day. They are no longer considered to be on the list. Farm managers, farm supervisors. And then the other one I want to point out, and this is what lots of people have talked about, but you and I, Alicia, we already covered this in our very, very first, I think it was the very first Express Entry Getting It Right episode. If you go to our podcast, you can subscribe, you guys. So if you go here, you'll see that we have our Express Entry Getting It Right series. We just dropped another two. Episode 160 is on the category-based draws, then police clearances, and this one here, certificates of qualification. So I bring this up, go back and listen to episode 158, or watch it here wherever you're watching our live streams. But when you're going through this, and I'm just going to go back. I've got so many things open. Is this it? Yes. So when you go back to trades, people are just all up in arms because there is this occupation on the list, 63200, a cook. How does a cook fit within trades? Why would they classify it here, Alicia?
Because it's a regulated occupation and it's
Yeah.
actually one where you require a certificate of qualification. So that's what they're talking about. And many people don't realize what is a certificate of qualification. And this is not for professions, it is for trades. When we take a look at the federal skilled trade requirements, they talk about which major and minor groups are included, and you will see that cooks and chefs are on the list. But
Yeah.
on the targeted draws, they just have the cooks. So
And I'll also point out here, people say, okay, well, cooks, well, why not chefs? Why are chefs not on the not on the list? And to be honest, I don't know, right? I don't know. All I can say is that there's going to be a lot of people who are working as a line, really a kitchen helper in the back of McDonald's or Wendy's or fast food franchises that are all going to be trying to claim that they're cooks. Excuse me,
Bless.
cooks for the purposes of express entry. And this is what we're dealing with, guys. We wanted to just do a quick little overview of that, just to refresh your memory, although I'm sure it was the main point of discussion last week. And once again, go read. Igor did a really good blog post on this and updated the category-based post he had done before. There's a breakdown of the winners and losers, and definitely listen to the podcast and watch the video. All right. So, Alicia, other than that big, huge, massive change, we're still waiting for the job offer points to officially be gone. They're still there, alive and well. But any thoughts on the current world we're in? And I actually will let everybody know that are watching. Please go ahead, post your comments now. We'll get into our Q&A section here in just a bit. Please also let us know where you're tuning in from, because we love to hear how far the podcast is going, who's paying attention, and it also helps us to really tailor the direction that we go when we're responding to questions. Couple little rules I want to establish. I usually try to just pick one question from one person in each live Q&A. So if you posted a whole bunch of comments, I'll probably skip through and just choose one so that we can distribute it evenly. I will also try to pick comments that I feel are going to be the most beneficial to everyone. If your question that you have is a question that starts with should I or what should I do, that really kind of points us down the path of direct legal advice, which Alicia and I are just not going to do in a live Q&A. We recommend that you slide over to our website, and basically what will happen is when we get that kind of a question, if I pull it up, usually I don't pull them up if there's specific questions, but if I do and we read it and it just sounds very specific, I'll ring that little bell, and then I'll direct you to slide over to our firm website and click, speak to a lawyer. That is how you can book a consult. And then it's super easy. You just, excuse me, you just go to our website, and then you can just select whoever you'd like to book a consult with, and you can schedule it right while we're here on the live. All right. Philip, thanks. I'm glad that you like the intro music. We definitely have a lot of fun playing around with that. At least I do, when everything is working properly. Let's see. We've got Kenny Bourne. He says hello. And I know, Kenny, you've got a lot of questions that you've posted. So I'll probably just select one. And if it's too specific, once again, you'll hear the little ring. All right. Well, Alicia, let's just dive right in. So Christina 56 says, what docs beside passport and COPR do we need to bring when landing? This is pretty well positioned. What other documents beside passport and COPR do we need to bring when landing as a permanent resident in Canada? Also, if I bring cash, do I still need to have bank statements? Woo, that's a doozy there. Alicia, do you want to cover the two main red flags that I see just whoo? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, one of the things that's important to realize, and this is actually outside of immigration law specifically, but it's in customs and importation. And so keep in mind that there are a few different systems, and one of them is customs and importation and duties and how you are bringing in goods into Canada. And it is very important that you do not bring in more than $10,000 Canadian equivalent in cash or cash instruments without declaring it, because it's an offense. And so they can seize that, they can seize the funds, and they can charge you with an offense. So when you are looking at your settlement funds, you want to be very careful that you are proving that you still have them if you had a requirement to provide settlement funds, and that it's updated, because the other thing that we know is those settlement fund figures change. And so they were updated last June. They're probably going to be updated again in another few months. So make sure that you still have proof that you meet the settlement fund requirements when you come in at the border. But that does not mean that you have to be carrying cash. It is a little bit risky to be carrying cash, and especially large amounts of cash. So you never want to have $14,000 in cash carried with you, unless you are properly declaring, disclosing, and making sure you're meeting customs requirements of goods being brought in. There's a money laundering act where they want to know the provenance of those goods. They want to know where all this cash came from, because it's not usual for people to be carrying that much. So that is one big flag when you're talking about settlement funds.
All right. Okay. So, Kenny, I suspected when I started to look at all of your questions that it was probably going to take us into a realm where I would need to ring the triangle. And I strongly recommend that you book a consult, Kenny. So, basically, what Kenny's asking is he's trying to determine if he's eligible for Canadian citizenship. So, his father and many generations before him was born and raised in Canada. So, that's his father. So, I was born in America in 74. So, Kenny, you're 2 years younger than I am, and never did anything to prove my Canadian citizenship. And then he says here, I'd like to do so now. However, I'm estranged from my father and I'm unable to obtain a copy of his birth certificate. I was able to find out from one of my sisters that he does not have it anyways. And then it kind of goes on. So, Kenny, I strongly recommend, you may very well, be able to get around that. You are currently, the way the law is, there was a change that's working its way through the legislative process in Canada. But when the government was temporarily paused or shut down here, that kind of died, that bill as it was working its way through. So we don't know what the future holds. But as a first generation born abroad, if your father was born in Canada, you do have the ability to pursue your citizenship, even though it's been many years away. But I'm going to once again just ring the triangle and recommend that you book a consult, Kenny, and myself, Alicia or Igor, we can help you to kind of work through that, especially given the difficulty you may be having in securing birth certificate from your father. Remember, obviously your birth certificate lists your father as your father. So there's usually ways that we can kind of work around that. But I recommend that you book a consult, Kenny. Okay. Spider-Man, as always, says it's about 0 degrees. It's above 0 degrees at 5 degrees today. We will applaud that. And Alicia, we had a little bit of a skiff of snow that came the last couple days down here, but it was so nice over the weekend. In fact, my brother and I, we went out and we did a little shed hunting, which is something that we love to do, looking for deer antlers that have dropped. And we went up into the mountains, and I'm just going to share, I'll share a little picture here. So Simba and I, this is just a picture of he and I, we were back up out in the prairies and just walking the hills and walking the coulees, as we call them, looking for deer antlers that have dropped. And you can actually see, I think, up above me here, you can see I've got one right back here up on my top of my desk up there. So so that's what we were doing. And it was a lot of fun. We got a lot of exercise. We covered a lot of ground. Simba, when this picture was taken here, he was pretty tuckered out by the time he's got little legs, and often we're trudging through taller grass, and there's a few little patches of snow, but the coulees, it was really cool. Let's see if I can see. Yeah. So this is just an example of what we've got going on there. Actually, this picture, Alicia, I know what this picture is. You guys cannot see this. You can't, it's too far away. But right, I can't even see. Can you, let me just do this here. I'm going to turn you on. Alicia, can you see my little hand pointing on the screen at all? Maybe you can't. You can't. Okay. So right in the middle of this picture, there's looks like a rock. So there's some taller kind of dirt mounds. And then about in the middle of the picture, there's something down there crouching, looking at me. This is a coyote. And Simba and I'll bring Simba back on the screen here. He is not a big dog, and he would be good food for this coyote. So he was off leash. And so I very quickly put the leash on him, and this coyote just stood there, and he crouched down and he was watching us, and he didn't go anywhere. He just stood there. So he cut our little trip a little bit short, because in this particular area, they have been known to lure little dogs away, and you never see your dog again. So that was Mark's adventure. Sorry, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that was the weather was so nice. It felt like it was truly spring, and it's not yet, but it's coming, Alicia. It's coming.
I saw a honeybee. I was out visiting friends
Oh
and their
yeah.
horses, and there was a honeybee out, and I was pretty worried about that honeybee. So, anyways, yeah,
Yes.
February, and there was bees.
I'm glad you said that because my brother came with me and I couldn't, he was like doing this and he said, yeah, there's a bee out. And so there was a
Hmm.
bee out there too. That's awesome. That's a good sign. We love bees. We love bees. Okay. Christina says, I rented a UPS mailbox to use as an address for my first PR card. They gave me a real street address, not a PO box only. Your thoughts on this? Well, Alicia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Christina, given your questions about, bringing in cash and how you land and stuff, probably would recommend you book a consult because there's probably a few moving parts that you want to make sure of when you're doing your landing process. So confirming, well, what kind of application did you do? Was it through Express Entry? Was it a different type of application? Are you sponsored as a spouse? But usually, some people do what's called a soft landing, right? They just try to come in, get their e-coper or their physical coper signed, and then they kind of turn around and head back out, and then they wait for their PR card. Well, you do have to be kind of careful because IRCC does not want to be sending documents usually to PO boxes. They want you to be inside the country, and they want to make sure that you're starting your residency obligations and you're maintaining your residency obligations. So a couple of things to talk about with the logistics of landing.
Yes. All right. Shalia's channel here. She says, hi, Mark and Alicia. How are you guys? Is there any draw will happen again for family connection and the job should be in demand job to be able to get an ITA? Thanks. I think, Alicia, do you want to tackle this one? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, Shalia, you're talking about the Alberta
Alberta.
Advantage Immigration Program. And so in Alberta, oh, it's super complex because basically they have created an Alberta worker expression of interest system. And when you look at that Alberta worker expression of interest drop down, it's going to ask you what category are you interested in applying under. And Mark, you and I actually had a conversation, and we were trying to sort this out for people because it is confusing. When you look at Express Entry, they have subcategories in Express Entry, and they make you
Yeah.
pick from a mandatory drop down of what you're interested in. And some people don't have a family connection, but they do have an in-demand job. And so they're conflicted and they're trying to figure out, well, what do I do? I don't want to misrepresent. And so the guidance from AAIP was that, all right, the drop down that you're selecting is just your indication of a preference. It's not binding, and AAIP can pick and choose however they want to combine factors. However, your obligation is to make sure that everything you put in your expression of interest is accurate and not misrepresentation. So make sure if you click family connection in demand job, that's okay, but make sure that if you do not have a family connection, you don't check the little box that says family connection. You just put what your knock is and what the rest of your entire thing in terms of your Express Entry profile, your primary occupation, work history. Make sure that you properly have identified all the other factors for which you are claiming points.
Yeah. All right. And that was an interesting discussion. Like the province has worked hard to try to find a way to manage the high numbers of people that are so desperate for the ever decreasing number of allocations. And as we know, Minister Miller reduced the province's PNPs by over 50%, well, about 50%, this past annual levels report. Um, and the release of the annual levels expectations for 2025. And it's left provinces in a real difficult position because every province, I don't think there's one in Canada that doesn't have more people wanting to be nominated than there are spots available. So we went through that whole kind of fiasco with the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program last summer when they were trying to sort it out. They knew that unless they shut down processing, that the processing times were going to just skyrocket to oblivion. And they then did the race to file, which wasn't so good. Then they created the expression of interest, and I had the opportunity to give them some feedback when they were creating that. And they've been really good with with listening to our feedback, and Alicia and I, we had an opportunity to do that for them with this question, because sometimes things are not clear. So so thank you so much for that question. Okay, let's see what we have here. Okay, Spider-Man's weighing in on the insurance person. I've seen this too, so maybe Minister Miller here can clarify. But ultimately, what many people now are thinking is that the insurance agents went in purely by error and incompetency. Once it's published, no one has the spine to admit it and to correct it. And so he says there's no transparency from IRCC. I'm sticking with my theory. And that's the fun thing, right? Like Alicia and I can pull up our crystal ball, and lots of people will ask and say, hey, is there going to be a CRS draw for trades? When's the next category-based draw going to be? And it's kind of fun to speculate. That's what we really like to do. And sometimes we, have a little bit of intel that can infuse our ultimate guess. But there's so much of what happens within immigration that they do a pretty good job at not releasing it before, before they want to make changes. But in like manner, as Igor and I alluded to in our last live stream on the category-based changes, they're very, very quiet when there's a change that is massively harmful to people or negative or like that. It seems like the impact when it's large, they do it very quietly. And then, we lost Alicia there. And then when and then if there is something that's not really that big of a deal, there's this big fanfare. And so that's kind of the situation that we've seen unfold over the last little while with Minister Miller and the announcements. I still can't figure out why the job offers have, why those have not been officially implemented and those points removed. This was announced a while back, and I'm not sure, Minister. All right, we'll pull Alicia back in once she reconnects. Let's get to some more questions. Okay, this one's from Alvaro, and he says, hey, Mark and Alicia, how are you guys? What happens if someone didn't pass the medical exam before the 30 days delay? Thank you. Okay, so Alvaro, I'm assuming maybe you missed the request to do it. There's always, you're always going to go ahead as fast as you can and get that medical done, even though you're past the 30 days, and try to upload it, try to notify them. So book it and do it as fast as you can. Obviously, they can refuse your application if you didn't respond within 30 days. But if you have not yet received the response, then race like crazy, Alvaro. Get that medical done, upload it in whatever form that they have available, confirmation that you've completed it. Usually when it comes to medicals, the information, it's always transmitted electronically, and they don't always ask for a copy of the e-medical information sheet that you get after you complete your exam. But I recommend that you upload it via web form as fast as you possibly can. All right, we've got a few super chats that have come in. So ABTTT says, will there be a STEM draw, and is 46 a good score? Well, if we look, the best way to kind of sort this out is to go back to the rounds of invitations. And let's see if we can pull this up. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the rounds of invitations. And let's see, I don't know if I have... Oh, Alicia's joining me. She is back. Okay, let's bring Alicia back in here. All right, you're back. All right.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
so Alicia, we're just talking about this question, the STEM draws, and ABT says, is 486 a good score? So what we're going to do is we're going to slide back to the rounds of invitations here, and let's just take a look at what's happened in previous rounds of invitations. So if we go to the previous rounds, and then we'll just type in STEM here, you can see it has been almost a full year since we had a STEM. In that time, when the first one was done, there was only 500 and the score was 486. Then almost 5 months later, they did another one, December. That was a very big one, almost 6,000. And it still only brought it down to 41. Then we look at this, 491, April 11th, 2024. And that has been the previous history. So if we are to go back and just, and let's see, I'll pull up the right one here. Okay, so ABTTT. So 486 is in the range of what STEM was in the past. And it's interesting, Alicia. Personally, I think it was the T in the STEM that kept the score high. So I think we had a lot of candidates that were, they were the IT folks. I'm not saying that was maybe the bulk of them, but I think it played a role, and a lot of them are stripped away. But it has been almost a year since our last STEM draw. So 486, personally, it's possible that we could see like 486 could potentially be enough, especially if they remove the job offer points. So at this stage, maybe it's in the range of possibility, I guess is what I'm saying. What are your thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah, my thoughts are that if I rub that little whoop crystal
Oh,
ball.
see, I'm moving the ball over to you now. We can never. I've got our cameras are some of them are flipped around, and so yeah, we'll move this ball. Maybe we shrink
You're
it
on
down
the
a bit
ball,
here.
Mark. You're on the
Yes,
ball.
I'm
Yeah.
on the ball.
So, okay, my thoughts, I'm a little bit more pessimistic on a 486 on STEM, and the reasons are there have not been STEM draws. And so if there is a STEM draw, it's been almost a year. And so I think that the number of people in the STEM draw has gone up and up and up, and which is going to push the amount that they can kind of scoop off the top higher and higher and higher. And so I think at a 486, that CRS score, if they were to do a STEM draw today, is probably going to be like high 400s, maybe even like 497 or a 500 or something like that, just because I think there's quite healthy competition for people who've been waiting almost a year now for a STEM draw.
Yeah. And we can see here, this one kind of just slipped through too. So
Mhm.
March the 3rd, 2 days ago, it's quite unusual for us to have a round of invitations on a Monday. But today, March the 5th, Wednesday, there was one. And it was a PNP. And you can see the number of invitations issued and the overall ranked score, 667. That basically means that someone qualified with 67 human capital points, at least what they had in their profile. And it's
Mhm.
quite amazing to, and Alicia, I think this has to be as low as you could almost possibly go with that
Mhm.
big round on February the 13th of 2021, where they invited every CEC candidate. This is for sure a CEC person, not an FSW.
Right.
But it was a 75. And I think when I did the calculations, there was a way to get drawn with, I think it was 65 points. I can't
Mm.
remember, 67. So this person would have to have just the very bare basic CLB 5, maybe for language and every ability. And, high school at best, maybe no education, and then the 1 year of Canadian work experience to get through CEC. But yeah, this score is really quite amazing.
Yeah.
That was
And
enough.
on that too, Mark, I saw a question and it's disappeared now because I had to log off and log back in.
Yeah,
But there was somebody who was asking about French category specific draws and
yeah,
how are you eligible for a category specific draw and do
yeah.
you still
I saw
need
that.
1 year of work experience?
Yeah.
And I wanted to come back to that because I think people might be a little bit confused about category specific draws. We've done lots of podcasts. Yes, this one from Franklin. It is important to realize that you still need to meet one of the basic eligibility criteria for either CEC or FSW or FST. So you've got to meet the minimum eligibility requirements for one of the three federal categories, and then you can be potentially chosen under a category-based draw. If it's French, then in addition to your either 1 year of foreign work experience that's continuous outside Canada, or your 1 year of Canadian high-skilled work experience, if you are looking at CEC eligibility, then you also have NCLC Level 7 in all categories in a TEF or a TCF exam.
And just, I think it was yesterday in a consult I had. Boy, yeah, we've been pretty busy with consultations lately. I had an individual. He was surprised when I told him that even if you're an international student studying, you can have a profile in the pool if you have federal skilled worker experience. There's no restrictions on having both, and then applying for your postgrad work permit. And it was exactly, Satyam, it was exactly your situation. They were an international student. They were getting ready to submit their postgrad work permit. They were retaining me to help them, make sure they got it right. And in the process of filing, I said, well, we should also put your profile in. There's nothing, you have nothing to lose. You've got French. You could get drawn under a French draw with your FSW eligibility. And he was very surprised. So yes, there's no, you could very well, Satyam, get through. Now B2, I can't remember what that equates to on the NCLC. I don't know if it's a 7. I can't remember. But ultimately, there are points for a second official language that are available.
And
And yeah.
this kind of circles back to I think we talked about it last week when people were saying, oh, well, I am doing an application for express entry, or I have a permanent intent, and now I'm never going to get approved for a work permit if I say that I have an express entry profile. Well, this is where it's still important. Dual intent provisions still do apply. And so yes, they will know that you have an express entry profile. If you've created an express entry profile and you're applying for your PGWP, you need to be honest about that. And you also still need to do the work to show that you do have a valid temporary intent. So this is where you're still showing ties to your home country. You're still showing that you can have enough money to support yourself. You still have an intent to comply with the law. So you can have both. You just can't have that permanent intent wipe out your temporary intent.
Mm-hmm. All right, next super chat. This comes from Marco. If tariffs, okay, all right, maybe I'll just bring it up here. Okay. Let's bring another visitor up too. Okay, if tariffs lead to job losses, will immigration quotas be further reduced or increased to align with labor demand changes? Very interesting times. And so there's a lot, you guys, that we really don't know. And, the election is a very big part of it. We have heard Pierre Poilievre, if the Conservatives get elected, that there's some discussion about tying Levels plans to housing builds. And obviously they've got aggressive plans for trying to build houses. That's on the platform that they're proposing. But what is the impact? What is their focus going to be? And the media love to ask questions about Levels plans. Those are numbers that they can put in their, in their news articles, and they are, very objective measure that they can point back to see if someone, if the parties are following through on what they've expected. And it also gives a pretty clear idea of what the future of immigration will look like in Canada. Ultimately, I don't know if the Conservatives will indicate what they will officially do during their platform. I guess we'll find out. But the tariffs, nobody knows. No one does what this is actually going to lead to. We don't. And you see reports all over the place, people speculating what it could mean. But all I can say is it's not going to be good for either country, for Canada or the US. And so hopefully clear heads will prevail, and that this won't get into a trade war, which Canada can't win that for sure. But ultimately, immigration has a number of different factors they're looking at. And when it comes to tariffs and the economy generally, Canada still has a large proportion of its working workforce that will be retiring in the coming years. And that's part of the reason why the Liberal government put the larger, Levels plans in place. But infrastructure also has to be there to support the people. And I think that's why they've taken the 180 and shifted back and trying to get people out now, because they felt too many people are in and the infrastructure can't handle them, which, people have been talking about that at length. I guess for both Alicia and I, it's just the it's hard not to get emotional, because every consult we have, like every other one, is a family who have sacrificed everything to be here and then, did nothing wrong, but they just, time is up and they're going to have to go home. And so all the sacrifices they made are over. But you can't ignore the fact that it is true. It's hard to find housing. It's hard to, it's hard to get a doctor, but that's a product of a whole bunch of failings, not just that they've let, perceived too many people in, but it's politics. And it doesn't matter whether you're conservative or liberal. Clearly they see things the same way, which is what's going to get me voted and what's going to get me elected. And I just hate the fact that this is going to become a wedge issue in the election, but it is what it is. Yeah.
And I will say, like, the one thing that this will have direct impact on is LMIAs, right? So we know that even without changing anything right now, the fact that there's unemployment figures that are being checked regularly, that is going to affect who can get low wage LMIAs. And so when we look at the refusal to process list on low wage LMIAs, we for sure know that if those unemployment rates go above 6%, and that gets renewed relatively frequently, um,
Mhm.
then nobody with low wage LMIAs will be able to get their applications processed. So there are some feedback mechanisms already that we know are built into the system based on the changes that were made last year on low wage LMIAs, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Next super chat. This is Akash, and Akash says, Akash Matthew, Mark, the spouse hasn't worked while the primary applicant was studying as he was taking care of their children in Canada. Will the spouse not working be an issue while applying for a spousal open work permit application after applying for the postgrad work permit? So what Akash is asking is if a person holds a work permit and they choose not to work, is that going to somehow impact on their ability to apply for an extension? I think, Alicia, is what Akash is asking. And I've got an answer for that, but I think that's probably what they've, because they say they haven't worked while the primary applicant was studying, not working being an issue while applying for the spouse. So maybe they had one, maybe they didn't. I don't know if they were a visitor here. But what the real issue is, Akash, is the changes that have recently occurred to eligibility for spousal open work permits. So if you are a foreign worker, one of the issues we've seen lately is that if you're transitioning to a postgrad work permit, my friend, you absolutely have to have a job that is either tier 0 or 1 or within one of the strategic occupations of tier 2 and 3. And if you go to our website, Igor did a great blog listing all of those, because sometimes it's hard to find what the actual eligible occupations are under tier 2 and 3. But that's really the biggest issue. No, there's no, just because you're on a work permit and you haven't worked, if it's an open work permit, or if you're here taking care of children on a visitor record, if you're accompanying a spouse that is on a work permit or will be on a work permit here, and you meet the other eligibility requirements, there's no restriction that I'm aware of, Alicia, that would, affect a person's ability to apply on a true open work permit. It's different if a person is on an LMIA-based work permit and they're not working and not getting paid. That can be an issue. But for opens, it's not. But you definitely, Akash, you want to watch this. And here's where the problem rises. Igor and I once again I think it was 2 weeks ago, we did an episode on the cruel tactics. And Minister Miller, I'm going to reiterate, these are very cruel of your officers who basically, when someone submits a postgrad work permit and they realize that they're not working in an occupation that is maybe on the list initially, or they don't have a job offer that encompasses that 16 months or whatever it might be of their work permit, and the spouse is not eligible right now, they will submit the postgrad work permit so they don't run out of time for that, and then they'll wait. And we had a situation where not one but two couples in the same week that booked consults with us on both both suffered from kind of the same fate. So what happened was the officer, well, let me take a step back. After a number of months, when the primary spouse got a job, then they submitted the spousal open work permit application. But when they did that, they hadn't yet received the decision on their first postgrad. In fact, processing times, I think, were up to 170 days and counting. And so what the officer did, which I think is really underhanded, is they processed the accompanying spouse's application first, even though it was submitted a number of months after. And then they refused it because, of course, there was no postgrad work permit of the principal applicant spouse it wasn't approved yet. And then not but a few hours later, the approval came on the spouse's postgrad work permit. And that's just one example. I don't want to take up a bunch of time, but Minister, that is not something that the department should be proud of, because the moment that spousal open work permit is refused for that spouse, then they have to stop working. And in this case, they're fully eligible to apply for a spousal now that their principal spouse was working in a qualifying position. But now they have to stop working for 4 or 5 months to then apply to restore status as a worker. And in some cases, it meant the difference between the family being able to pay their rent and stay in Canada versus going home. So I'm sure that was not what you intended, Minister, with this desire to get people out of the country. But these are the real life consequences and stories that we're seeing.
And I want to break this down for people because it is now so complex in terms of both applying for a PGWP and whether the spouse can get that open spousal work permit. So go back, take a look at the new rules for PGWPs after November of 2024. So they changed the rules. So now it depends on the type of program, it depends on field of study, and it depends on you making sure that you have language test results in many, many cases, and having an eligible duration on that PGWP. So be careful about whether you're eligible for PGWP in the first place as the principal applicant. The second thing is go take a look at the open work permits for family members of foreign workers after the changes January 21st, 2025, because this is where the rubber hit the road and they significantly changed things, like Mark was saying, about who's eligible now to apply. And so they changed the rules fundamentally January 21st. So go take a look at that webpage. There's two different variations. If your spouse is applying separately, if your spouse is applying with you, if your spouse is applying at the same time you apply for your PGWP, or if they're applying after. And so there are a number of minefields. There are lots of ways this can go wrong. And so follow this very, very carefully when you're looking at eligibility for open spousal work permits given a PGWP. I have a lot of consults. I had consults this week about people really trying to be strategic about this, because you're right, Mark, it is so hard to try to make sure that you have a job offer that starts the instant that you are notified of completion of studies that meets the tier 2 or tier 3 eligible categories, but you can't start working full-time yet. So you have to have all your ducks in a row, and then you make sure to include the spouse exactly at the same time, submit those applications, and then you can't start working until you've submitted your application. But there's a lot of moving factors, and you've got to make sure your passports are valid. Take a look at Igor's article. Please book a consult, because these are really
Yeah.
complex situations now because of
It's,
all the changes from
yeah.
IRCC.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I want to also show you guys one follow-up question from Kim. She said, my spousal open work permit is valid until August 2026. And my wife plans to apply for a postgrad work permit in June 2025. Will my open work permit remain valid after her status changes? This is a really, really good question. Alicia, what are your thoughts on the ongoing validity of the accompanying spousal open work permit that has a expiry date, that would have been to the same expiry as the original study permit, but once the principal spouse transitions to a postgrad work permit, what impact, if any, does that have on the open spousal work permit that the person has? Basically, the C42 work permit.
Mm-hmm. So that, as long as that open spousal work permit remains valid, it should remain valid, right? So unless it is canceled or altered, it should remain valid. Normally, that spousal open work permit is issued to the same duration of the principal applicant. So it's a little bit weird. I'm assuming that maybe sorry, my dog is barking in the background.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, I'm assuming that maybe your spouse on the PGWP did an accelerated course of studies and they might be graduating early, and maybe that's why there's differences in terms of the two expiry dates.
Yeah, that may very well be the case. I think I can do this. Here, I'll show you my fierce dog here. I've got the Simba cam I figured out, Alicia. So check this out here. So, let's see if I can get him here. Oh, what have I got going on here?
You've
I
got
got it
you've got
upside
the
down.
system, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Oh, you're a little bit. I saw part of Simba's little
I'm
kind
trying to
of
figure out, is it upside
bed
down?
there.
Why is it doing this? This is so weird. I this is so weird. Where's it showing it? That is bizarre. Why can it not show him? I don't
There
know
you
what's
go. There you
Yeah,
go.
but I don't know what's going on. Why is it doing that? That is so weird. Oh, it must be this. Here, let me do this one. I picked the wrong one. There we go.
There we go.
There's my fierce dog here. Hey,
I have a
Simba.
German Shepherd, and she sits at the window and she
Ye-
barks whenever a dog goes by.
All right, there you go. That was a quick little Simba cam there. That was so weird. I don't know. There's a different feature on this eCam. It must have been. Anyways, okay. So you should bring your German Shepherd up onto your lap, Alicia, so you can show him to the crowd. All right. Okay, let's hit another super chat here. So this is from Movnite. Hi, Mark and Alicia. Does a 1 year paid full time, 40 hours per week internship in a tier one role outside Canada count as work experience for express entry? Thank you. This is 100% right in the wheelhouse of this little sucker right here. This is something we cover in the Express Entry Accelerator all the time. It's the exact type of thing. Well, in fairness, anything related to Express Entry is included in our Express Entry Accelerator Masterclass, and there's a link in the description below. But Alicia, this is a
Yeah.
big common misconception that people have.
Yeah, and so there's a difference between inside Canada work and outside Canada work. If it is outside Canada work, it's high skilled, it's tier one, and you were paid. So this is the big thing. So if you were not paid, you cannot claim foreign work experience. If you were paid and it was an internship and you can get proof that it was a tier one role and you worked at least 40 hours a week, then that can go towards your foreign work experience points. It is different if you're in Canada. If you are on an internship as part of your program of studies, and that's a mandatory requirement of your studies, then internship work inside Canada does not count as Canadian high skilled work experience. But if you're outside Canada and it was a paid internship, then it ought to count as long as you can prove it.
Okay. Got another super chat that slid in here. This is from Pranav. He says, any idea about trade draws, CRS? I'm waiting at 452, but now that cooks are there, do you think I am at risk? I would really appreciate your opinion. Well, it's hard to say, Pranav. Like, this is one thing when it comes to trades by, just historically, the rounds of invitations have been lower with trades. So if we go back to our right here and we just pull up our, just going to go back. I think this is the latest round. And then, oh, that's this. Just give me a second, guys. I got too many little drop down menus on the government website now. If we go here and we just type in trade, so you can see the last trade draw in October was 433. So yours is 452. So there's a good chance, I think, that you're still going to get drawn. And the reason, even though there may be a lot of cooks out there, you don't need a bachelor's degree to work as a cook. You don't need a master's degree. And in many instances, if they even remove the job offer points, which I suspect eventually at some point, Minister Miller here is eventually going to drop that hammer. I don't really know what's holding him back. Then I think you've got a decent shot at it, given the history of trades. And, if you look back to the beginning of time, these are the old federal skilled trade draws. They haven't done one of those in a long time. But since the modern era of targeted draws, you can see we had 388 here when there was a large, and it really comes down to how many invitations are issued and, and how frequently they do them together. So,
And I did
Alicia?
want to mention to Mark, because when they're now doing trade occupation specific draws, it's super confusing for people because this doesn't mean federal skilled trade. It doesn't mean they did a draw under FST. What it means is somebody qualifies under either CEC or FST or FSW, and they have at least 6 months of experience in one of only the listed NOCs on that updated trade list within the last 3 years. So it doesn't mean that it's only a FST specific. You could be under CEC or FSWP, the Federal Skilled Worker Program, as long as you have 6 months within the last 3 years and you meet all the other regular eligibility criteria of one of the three federal
Mm-hmm.
programs.
All right. I've got a follow-up super here from Akash. He says the couple came with study permit for the primary, and so was a C42, and an open work permit for the spouse together to Canada. The concern they have is if the spouse being inactive with an open work permit will be an issue. The spouse only did gig works like Uber. No, Akash, there's no issues with that on an open. There's no expectation that you'll even work when you get that work permit as a spousal. C42 is the exemption code. So no, I don't see any issues with that at all. Alicia, do you?
Yeah, it's just a matter of the primary applicant, the
The
one who's applying for the PGWP, getting that
eligibility.
job. and making
Yeah.
sure that you have eligibility for the spouse to apply even for that open spousal work permit. And the timing is everything, because if you can't have everything perfectly lined up initially, then basically the primary applicant who's applying for the PGWP has to submit that application first, just like we were talking about before.
Hmm.
That has to come back. It has to be valid for at least 16 months. And only then could the spouse start working. But they have to stop working in the meantime. And they would have to submit an application to change their conditions. So they would actually have to switch to visitor status if they're inside Canada to make sure that they don't fall out of status until the spouse is able to get that postgrad work permit. It has to be valid for 16 months, and only then could they then submit their application for the work permit. I just checked the processing times, they're 117 days. So
Yeah.
it's going to
Yeah.
be a while.
It is. And please go to Igor's blog post here on our firm website. Just go to blogs and resources, click on blog, and you can find all of our most recent blog posts here. Changes to the categories, bridging open work permits. You definitely want to read that one. Alicia and I, this was a part of our Time's Up series. And then Igor did this great blog post that he has kind of revived, the spousal open work permit. And in here, he includes detailed, very simplified, easy to see, master's 16 programs of 16 months or longer, doctoral PhD programs, and then select professions. And if you scroll down, you can see here for the spouse of the foreign worker, which would be your situation when you're transitioning from a C42 to a C41 work permit, accompanying a skilled worker in Canada. You can see here Igor actually has put in all of the eligible occupations. And the list is not tiny, but it's still pretty darn confined. The same elements: healthcare, trades, technical positions, especially at the tier 2. And then if you get to the tier 3s here, which you have to kind of backtrack a bit the way this pulls up here, just give me a second. You can see there's a lot of trades, technicians, technologists, dental assistants, healthcare, nurse aides, and for people that are here, and this is the big issue, a lot of people have come and studied in business related programs, and they've completed their, business diploma or Bachelor of Management or whatever it might be. Those occupations, unless you're at a tier 0 or 1 in a management level, many of them, business related, general business, bookkeepers, things like that, are just not on this list. And
Right.
understand that this is all by design, you guys. This isn't just by accident. This is intentional, because this is a part of the Liberal government's desire to have 1 million people leave by the end of this year. At least they perceive that there's going to be at least that many with work permits expiring that won't be able to be renewed. And when you have a couple and the primary spouse is transitioning from a study permit to a postgrad work permit, it's often that accompanying spouse that has the good job that's helping the family to support themselves. And so with these steps that they're taking now to really restrict it, they're basically saying, we want you to go home. And if you can't support yourself, this is all by design. So all we can do is try to find pathways forward for people and help them navigate through this crazy world. Okay, ABTTT says, do you think the knocks removed could bring the points down? Possibly. Now they've added a bunch more with the, with the ultimate, like the healthcare, they've added a bunch more. But in the other draws, it's like, if you're a butcher, it's going to be so weird. Oh, we're doing an agriculture, agri-food kind of draw, and only the butchers. So I'm curious to see how many butchers are going to be on that list. If it's going to be 3, right? So I'm not even joking. 3 with a score of 200 and whatever. So, but hey, this is when you are when you're the government, you have the ability to make these decisions, and they have the reasons for making the decisions that they have. And then ultimately it's up to us to kind of deal with it and just move forward and look for pathways. Okay, here's an interesting one from Luigi. Sure, Albin. Albin says, I'm leaving the country in the following weeks. Oh, I'm ringing the bell. I'm ringing the bell, Albin. In the following weeks, but my profile will be in the pool. What I need to change in the profile as soon as I leave the country. If I receive an ITA, How long I have to, I think, probably come back. I didn't see the full question, but this is one, Luigi. Anytime someone says, what should I do? Especially when it comes from leaving the country, which can affect things. Um, when individuals like we need a whole lot more information. I don't even know if we can even pull something out of here. Um,
I think we could pull out, okay, it is an obligation of each applicant to keep their profile up to date. And so if your address changes, one of the things that IRCC did last year was they added postal codes everywhere, right? So they said, what is your current postal code? What are your employer's postal codes? So you need to make sure that you update your address and contact information for sure, because that's something that you have a positive obligation to do. So we can definitely say that. And in terms of if you do receive an invitation to apply, once you receive an invitation to apply, your profile is locked, right? So you can't go in and change things in your Express Entry profile. You would need to explain changes in your EAPR. And once you get an ITA, you've got 60 days, and that is it. That is set in stone. If you don't get your EAPR submitted within those 60 days, then you just don't, you lose that ITA basically.
all right, let's see if we can kind of work our way through here. Marco says, I'd like to apply for a visitor visa for my parents. My father has 12 brothers. Do we have to include all addresses, etc.? Yes, Marco. Short answer is yes. So the additional family information and the family information form that's often the part of those visitor visas does ask to list the siblings. And so, yes, you need to do it and be as comprehensive as you can. If for whatever reason you can't remember like you can't find an address or there's other factors, then you need to explain that. But yes, that's a part of it. Olga says, new processing time updated February 5th, applied to all applications or only to those submitted after this date. Thanks. Okay. So some cases, the processing times are backward facing. So we're processing applications submitted on this day. It will say in the processing times. Other times it will say this is what we expect processing times to be, like for Express Entry. They have, they have certain obligations to try to keep the applications, at least 80% of them, within 6 months. But processing times, in Canada are about 5 months for Express Entry. But for the other ones, the 28 months, that's kind of a projection of how long it's taking an in Canada spouse or common law partner application to be processed. So it doesn't apply to all applications. Well, she probably means within that category. If you've already submitted your application, well, it just depends. That's kind of where it is as of the day they release the processing times.
Yeah, and Olga, for example, so if you go to the IRCC website, you look at how long it's taking to do a temporary visitor visa or a study permit or a work permit from inside Canada, it says 117 days. It says, yeah, so if we go temporary residence and we say work permit from inside Canada, initial and extension, and then we get processing times, it says 117 days. Then if you click on how we calculated this processing time, it tells us that this is a backwards looking. This is how long it took IRCC to process most complete applications in the past. So that's the number that they're giving you there.
And then if we look at, while we're on that topic, if we go to the spousal sponsorship, so we go to family class, and then we'll go spouse or common law partner living inside Canada, outside of Quebec, and we click on this. So this is what I was talking about. Oh, it's came down 4 months. What a gong show. Like, okay, I'll just leave it the way it is. So you can see here how we calculate the processing times. This is how long we expect it will take us to process the application if received today. Why they do it like that, I don't know. They're both in Canada applications, other than to make our lives just fun and to be able to pull up crystal balls and, and do a whole bunch of divination. It's just good
Keep us
times.
on our toes.
Indeed. Okay, we'll try to get through a few more here. Time is very, very quickly passing. We're just about out of time here. Okay. Mashiko says, hey, Mark and Alicia, do you think the new caregiver program will have a small cap and therefore be, I'll pull this up, a small cap and therefore be a first come, first served basis application? Thanks. We always have seen just limited quantities of these. And so whether or not it's a tiny, tiny cap, they're definitely, with the reduced overall numbers, they do not see caregivers as a priority. For whatever reason, they haven't seen it that way for years. I think to a large extent, they've felt there's large amounts of fraud within the program or abusive workers. And so they've been struggling to find a good way to do it such that the individual workers are protected. And it's resulted in low numbers. All right. Next on our list here, this is Zahir. He says, for the category-based draws, let's say for the trades draw, can you have a year experience in a next job to create the express entry profile and use 6 months trade experience and apply? Yes, you can, Zahir. You can absolutely do that. Remember, the 6 months has to be within the previous 3 years. So if it's older than 3 years, you can't count it, but absolutely. It does not need to be your primary knock. The work experience you're claiming for the category-based draws can be anywhere within your Canadian experience, as long as it's fully within the 3 years immediately preceding filing your application. Shanakia says, do you reckon 450 is a decent score prediction for next trades draw? So I think we had another one like that, and I think we've covered that quite at length. I think it is. I think it's got a shot. That's my view. Okay. Cram says, oh, I love that. I love that name. Cram maybe. Do you know why I love that name so much, Alicia?
Because of Kramer?
Because it's Mark backwards. I used to use that as profile name sometimes. Yes. It was back in my Conan the Barbarian days. It sounded like a good Conan name. Anyways, hi, Mark and Alicia. For this eligibility or an equal amount of part-time experience, how many hours must be obtained if you or on a part-timer? Currently working as a healthcare aide in Alberta. So part-time, do you want to just hit that quickly?
And so IRCC will look over a 2-year period. Can you show 1-year equivalency? And so this can get quite complex. Some of my clients who are like healthcare workers or have multiple part-time jobs, we literally spreadsheet things, and we have them go back and take a look at their pay stubs and take a look at their timesheets and make sure that they are proving that in any given week, they're not claiming more than 30 hours if they're working 2 different part-time jobs, but that they're working at least 15 hours a week. So at least half time, and then they add up those weeks. So if it's normally, full time at 52 weeks, then take a look at your 104 weeks and then make sure that you have at least 15 hours throughout the course of that.
Yes. Okay, so this super chat from Abd says, do you think the knocks removed could bring the points down? She meant the stem. And, Alicia and I had that discussion between the two of us. And, I think maybe. Alicia's not so certain. And ultimately, it's just this. We're just working the crystal ball. Okay. Ink Tattoo says, what are one's options when their permanent resident application is still being processed after the standard times have elapsed? Well, typically what I'll do is I'll do an ATIP. I'll access to information and just see if there's anything that's happened. In the past, I have situations where people had come to me and said, hey, my application's at 7 months and it says 5 months processing. Well, there might be a number of factors. You could be from a country like Iran where the security screening or China and background processing just is taking a long time. But if it extends past the stated processing times, I will do an access to information request and look at the GCMS notes to see if there's some issue. Sometimes I've had with people who've brought this question up, we've done that, and it says review required, and it talks about a problem with the application that they didn't realize. Well, in those situations, the client retains us. I go in, I go through their whole application. We review it to see if, what this officer might have concerns with, why it's been sent for further review. And then we will proactively add more information in via web form to correct whatever problem that we see is appearing in the GCMS notes, and just do it proactively. And I can't tell you how many times in the past I've done this, and the person has heard nothing more from IRCC until they get their eCoper portal invitation. So that's how I deal with it, Alicia. I don't know if you have any other additional thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people are all up in arms. They haven't processed my application. And then I ask them, has there been any request for additional
Good
documents
point.
in your application? And oh, yeah, they asked for this. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why did they ask for that? What were they asking for? Oh, by the way, you submitted the wrong education credential assessment because you were in a listed profession and you only submitted a WES, and they're going to refuse your application. You can try to save it, and in some circumstances that might work, but be really careful that you didn't miss something key to your application.
Yeah. Shout out to Andy. Good to have you joining us, Andy from Ottawa. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to find ones that we haven't answered yet. Kenny says, thanks. I'll book a consult. You're welcome, Kenny. Our pleasure. And we can kind of sort through that with you. Prakash says, I'm a master's student and my spouse was refused based on financial grounds. How long should I wait and reapply? I have a part-time job here and my wife has a job and a master's degree. So I think what he's referring to is the spousal open work permit. I think because he's a master's student, and she was refused on financial grounds. We're just assuming, Prakash. This is one of the challenges. So whenever we have that, that's why we ring the bell and say slide over to our website and book a consult, because we definitely need more details and more information. But when an application is refused, you do have options. One is to request reconsideration, which is not terribly effective these days. And the other, depending on the application that you've submitted here, you're a student, so I'm assuming it's not a spousal sponsorship. It's probably a spousal open work permit. And if that's the case, then you have the ability to seek leave by filing a leave application for judicial review. If it can be shown that there was, the decision was not reasonable.
Yeah, and financial grounds is tough. There's different contexts for financial grounds. Just like Mark was saying, there's a different context for temporary applications. If you're just looking at a work permit, there's different requirements if you are actually talking about a spousal sponsorship, because under spousal sponsorships, technically, if one of you is a Canadian sponsoring a non-Canadian, then you don't have to meet the low income cutoff guidelines, but you do have to show that neither of you would go on social assistance. And so there's section 39 financial inadmissibility in those contexts. So yeah, it's probable that you're looking at a temporary application. And if it's financial grounds, really, they want better proof that you as a student and your spouse can support yourselves financially. And so, if you've got a lot of debt, if you've got a lot of loans, then it's going to be a matter of proving to them that you're able to service your debts and still have enough money coming in to support yourselves in Canada.
All right, I'll hit this one here. Do you think there'll be a CC draw for CRS 507 before year end? I think so. I think if they ultimately pull them and they continue to do, which they've said in the levels plans that in Canada is a priority, I think there's a chance at 507. We've seen it last year when they did multiple large draws. And I think as people are running out of time, I think there's going to be, I do personally. Rajesh says, any chance of increasing the P&P quotas for upcoming years if Conservatives win this time? It's hard to say. Like it's hard. If they say, is there any chance? I think there is. I think there's a really good chance that they will. I think the reason the numbers were cut in half was because of different priorities that the Liberals had. And aside from the tiff that the minister had with some of the provinces over refugees, I think they just wanted to have more control over where the allocations went. They wanted to focus more on people that were skilled and not semi-skilled or low skilled, which typically the provinces have programs that support lower skill individuals. And so maybe that was a factor, but I think there's a really good chance that the numbers would go back up, obviously at a cost to other categories. So, but each government, and we don't know if the Conservatives are going to get elected, but each government has their priorities. And so I recommend that you guys take a look and see what they, where they're at. Obviously the Liberals are very clearly explaining and acting on what they feel are priorities. We just don't know what the Conservatives are going to do right now, but maybe we will be fortunate enough hopefully in a few weeks, I'm hoping to have someone come on from the party and talk about their platform and what they view. And I think they're still sorting it out. So maybe we'll get the immigration critic to come. I wish Minister Miller would come and join and talk about where they're going, but he's pretty out there and it's not a mystery about what they're doing. So, all right. Rick says, for work experience and express entry profile, do we need to input all 10 years or only those years that for which we're claiming points for? And this is right in the wheelhouse of the course as well, you guys. This is something that I talk about a lot in our Express Entry course. And if you're late to the game, this Express Entry Accelerator is the sponsor essentially of this live Q&A that we're doing here. And I have a masterclass that will be coming this Wednesday. Did I do it last Wednesday? I can't remember. Either this Wednesday or next, every other Wednesday at 4 to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And the last one was awesome. So many good questions. And you can come back as many times as you want to get your questions, and it's specific. And here, when someone says, "What should I do?" Can't help you. But in that group, we have the ability to drill in a lot deeper and get to questions that we just can't do in a live stream. So I recommend that you have not had a chance to subscribe to this lifetime access. If you hate it, you can full money back guarantee. You've got 30 days to check it out, which for all intents and purposes, I guess some could go watch every lesson and then after get the benefit from it and say it sucks and I'd give you your money back. So there's no risk to trying it out and just joining the masterclass, and you can come back as many times as you want. And when I say lifetime access, this will get updated here as soon as Minister Miller right here drops the job offer points, because I'll have to redo a bunch of videos. So yeah, so if you haven't subscribed, link in the description below. But Alicia, does he need to put everything in there? Does he need to put
No.
all his work history and fill it in for the last 10 years?
No, so you only put exactly what you are claiming your work experience points for. So make sure that you are properly claiming your start date, your end date, you're correctly identifying your NOT code, and you are properly putting in your average hours of work, as well as making sure with your employer that you are choosing the right NOT code. So only the ones that you're claiming points for in your profile. And then if you get an ITA, then you put everything in your personal history.
Bet. Okay, last one. We'll finish off with the super chat. Then we will have to close her down because we've got firm meetings we got to get to. Darwin says, "Hi, Mark and Alicia. Is it allowed to work while waiting for the post-grad work permit approval for the principal applicant? Does the spouse's open work permit need to stop work?" Let's go right to the source, Alicia. So this is where the answer comes from. So people just, they don't know. They just think that some officer at some point has said, yeah, the moment you file your post-grad work permit, you can then start to work. But this is the provision within the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations. So this is the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulations, and we call it Section 186. And if we go down here to the bottom, Alicia, maybe you can take the
W,
lead.
there's a
And
whole alphabet there almost. Yep. So, okay, so this is what gives people the ability to apply for that PGWP and continue to work until you get a decision on the PGWP. But you have to satisfy all the requirements of sub W. So if you are or were the holder of a valid study permit who's completed their program of study
so you've
and
received the confirmation that your program of study, you've met the requirements to graduate.
yeah. And you have to meet all the sub requirements of subparagraph V. So now you got to go up to the next section that when you held that study permit, you were full-time enrolled. It was a DLI. The program is a valid academic program. It was lasting more than 6 months, that leads to a degree, diploma, or certificate, and that you did not breach that obligation
This,
when
yeah.
you were a student and you were not working more than 24 hours per week during the regular academic sessions. So um,
And
this,
this is particular based on the policies that were in place at the time in which you were studying. So it says now they work no more than 24 hours per week. But yes, for some of you, you may have even been eligible to work full time. But you have to have fully complied with all of the conditions on your study permit. And people who have worked more hours, what they have to understand now, immigration is being very, very rigid with this. And if they feel that you have worked 26 hours at some point, and they know about it, they can refuse to they can refuse your post grad work permit entirely. But
in
you're
fact, they
not.
have to.
Yep.
Yeah, because there's another provision, and I can't remember which section it is now, but it's in my Can Students Work After the End of Studies blog article, where if you have worked without authorization, officers are actually prohibited from issuing that PGWP unless 6 months have passed since the unauthorized work. So the timing of when that unauthorized work took place is also important.
You bet. So they have to met the requirements of paragraph V, and
So this is where you had to have applied for that work permit before the expiry of the study permit, and you're still waiting for that decision. So make sure, take a look at my article about when you have to stop working, when you are notified of the end of completion of studies. So it could be the first time you get a letter or an email from your school, or it could be when you get your transcripts. Usually the degree or diploma is the last thing that happens. But if you, yeah, can students be working after the end of their
maybe it's
studies?
students here.
Um, yeah, there we go.
There
So
it
that's
is.
the
This
ones.
one.
Yeah. And if you did properly submit, so you stopped working as soon as you were had notice of completion, and then you got all your documentation together, you submitted your PGWP properly, it's a complete application. From the day that you submit your complete PGWP application, then you are eligible to work full-time as long as you meet all the requirements under 186 sub W.
All right. Okay, everyone. That was we went a little overtime here, but it's hard. Some days, like when we first started doing this live stream, we were happy when we had, maybe 60 people that were attending live. But with everything that's happening now, we know how important this is to all of you. We know how these changes are impacting your lives on a daily basis. You're constantly having to reassess your strategic plans, what you're going to do, the options that are available. And all of these things are very in the forethought of what Alicia and I are doing right now. Everything that we do when we're trying to figure out what topics we should have for our podcast, what blog posts that we should write. And I just want to point out a few of these other free resources for you guys, because some of you will not get your questions answered, but I'll bet there's a really good chance we have already covered your question in a previous video or on a blog post or in our podcast. So if you go to blog and resources on holthelaw.com, the descriptions are always in the link below. You can go to our blog, like I said here, and just type in the search bar, whatever keyword you want, and very likely it's going to pull up a blog post that we've written on one of these topics. And we have just a ton of blog posts. We also have, obviously, our podcast. And Alicia and I have created very strategic series designed to help you guys. And so you can go to our website here, but it's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and then you can subscribe to it. But if we go back, and I'll take us right back here to all of them, I don't know to what extent we'll get to all of them, but if we go back to episode 149, that is where we started our Time's Up series. And that was October the 16th. And we knew what was coming, you guys. We knew what was coming. So we created this series, and there's blog posts, there's videos also associated with a lot of this. But the Time's Up series is focused on all of you that are running out of time. And there's so much information getting spread all over about what you should do. There's so many people that are looking to exploit you and take advantage of you, that the one powerful tool you have to defend yourself from, being duped by someone is knowledge, and it's education. And yes, we offer consultations to help people, but we do these live streams so that we give you the tools that you can make good decisions. Sure, if you want to hire someone, then we hope you would hire us and that you would trust us and you would book a consult and see value in it. But those of you who are in a situation where you just don't feel like you either have the time or resources, or you feel that you've got everything under control, don't take things for granted. Don't just assume that you understand everything. Please go back, subscribe to the podcast, the YouTube channel, wherever you're listening or watching what we're doing, and check out these Time's Up series. So the first one talks about, it basically breaks down all the different options that people have been throwing out. And then we slowly worked backwards, drilling down deeper into the specific issues that are really important to you. So check out the Time's Up series, high cost of staying illegally in Canada. What happens if you choose to do that? Really? My work permit expires. Can I change to visitor status? Sound familiar? How to move to the US was a special one that we just dropped in after the election, but that there's no extensions for postgrads. Don't expect Minister Miller to come with another 18-month postgrad work permit. That won't happen. H&C applications, which people are telling you to do. A whole file in H&C. Well, this is what you need to know. This one is all about when not to claim refugee status in Canada. And for those of you who've been here a long time, that's the vast majority of you. Now, there may be situations where it makes sense to, that this is a viable option for you given your unique circumstances, but listen to this, watch this one on claiming refugee status. And then we did one on the LMIAs, no points. Well, this was back January 11th, and we're here March, and there's been no change 2 months later, but any day it's going to drop. Applying for a bridging open work permit. Don't make these mistakes. And why do we have these topics, Alicia? We have them because people are booking consults making these mistakes. And we don't want you, we would by far rather do a podcast or a video, share this information, educate you so that you're not coming to us after when there's probably in many cases not much that we can do to save it. And then as we go through, we're now, as of February the 20th, we dropped our first episode on Express Entry Getting It Right. So this is the series, Express Entry Getting It Right. We started with those pesky certificate of qualification points. What the heck do they mean? Like, how do I get them? And we covered that. Then we touched on police clearances. Igor and I did an episode, a special one on the new category-based draws. And Alicia and I just today, the reason we were late is because we were recording a special episode on settlement funds. So there's usually a video associated with this, but if you guys are commuting, we recommend you subscribe to the podcast, and it's all about trying to educate. So thank you, Alicia, for the time you take to join me on these live streams. We are so grateful for the privilege we have of working with all of you. And I'll be honest, in 20 years, I've never had more tears, legitimate tears shed for people, watching them see their dreams evaporate when they did nothing wrong. And that's what I want the message to get out. Sure, I think we all agree that the numbers and the ability of our infrastructure to house everyone has been strained, no doubt about it. But please don't blame people who have legitimately followed the rules, have submitted their applications, have paid their fees, have done all the things that they were supposed to do, who are law-abiding people who genuinely are just trying to make a better life for themselves. But instead, look at the decision makers. And at the end of the day, people made choices. The Liberal Party made choices. The Conservative Party made choices when they were in power. The government decides who comes in, and the government decides who can stay. And that's the situation we're in right now. But, just make sure that your ire is pointed to the right place. And it's always easy I'll point out, to look back in hindsight and look like a genius, and you shouldn't have done this and you shouldn't have done that. But at the end of the day, we're in the situation we're in and it is what it is. And it's just trying to manage and make the best of it. Any last comments, Alicia?
I'm just going to add to that too, Mark, and I'm going to say, not only do we need to point ire, I think we also need to say, where are we going to show compassion? And a lot of the times, we speak to people who are immigrating and in the process of immigrating and are hardworking every single day. But when I go out into the community and I talk with, regular Canadians around me, I think sometimes people just don't often talk to immigrants, and they don't realize the stories and what they've been going through. And I think we need a little bit more compassion, because I think part of the reason that the politicians are acting the way they do is because of public misperception and public fear about immigrants. And I think if we took some time to actually speak with people face to face and actually understand what they're going through and how they're contributing, and how hard people are working, I think that would make a difference.
Yeah, I agree. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Someone said that they liked the intro music, so here we go. We'll have a little outro music. All right. Thanks so much, Alicia, and thank you all for joining us. We'll be back again next week, or maybe even sooner if there's some other crazy new announcement.